Okay, so our first review of the day is going to be for the Netflix animated series, The Tomb Raider, The Legend of Lara Croft. There, and Lara Croft in this is played by Haley Atwell. Haley Atwell, who's doing the voice here. People might know she was Agent Carter in the MCU. There, she was good old there, Agent Carter, Peggy, good old Peggy, there in that. And she's voicing the role here. And this animated series takes place after the rebooted video game series there. So this is the reboot trilogy there. So this is which concluded with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So this takes place after those events. So as far as canon and timeline wise, that's where it kind of lines up there. Which kind of makes sense because the model of Laura Croft very much fits the rebooted version of the character that you have there. Very much fits that style there. And so what it does is kind of fills the gaps in the timeline, bridging the reboot trilogy to the original series of games there. Did you play the rebooted Tomb Raider games?
Yeah, I played all three of them.
Okay, and what were your thoughts on those?
I liked them for the most part. One thing that I do think they struggled with a bit was, well, two things I think they struggled with a bit because I'll mention both because I think it feeds into the show a little. Um, is they had a bit of a trouble creating like a supporting cast, I think, in those games that was super interesting. Like I think Lara was always characterized in a way that was interesting and engaging, but sometimes the supporting casts of those felt, I don't know, felt a little bland. And then the other big thing was, and this was what I don't, what at times in this show sometimes feels like it doesn't totally line up the way it feels like it's supposed to, is when you start this series, she's very, very hung up on the death of her mentor Roth, which that happens in the first of the reboot trilogy. That's the 2013 game, and she's not super hung up on his death in at least in the third game. She's kind of moved on, or kind of had closure over that already. Um, and so there is a little bit of the like kind of what happened with the Spider-Man trilogy, the MCU Spider-Man trilogy, where they introduced him and made a big point about how he's kind of gone through that character development. He's become Spider-Man. He's had that moment already. And then later they're like, oh, but it turns out this was all an extended origin story. And it kind of seems like they're doing character regression just a little bit. So it's an interesting thing is that it's supposed to, because I didn't know before watching this that it was supposed to be like a direct follow-up to the three games. But I do feel like it where her character is at the end of that third game doesn't quite feel like the same place that this picks up. It kind of feels like you have to ignore a little bit of what happened in the games for this to totally make sense.
Mm, okay. And this is a show run by Tasha Hio there, who show runs in. This is an 8 episode series. Like I said,
This is
on
a Powerhouse Animation. Is that correct? The studio that they did Castlevania as well.
yes, yeah, it is Powerhouse Animation there who did do this, yeah. And yeah, you're right. They also did Castlevania as well. It's one of the things they also did there. Yeah, yeah, very nice. They did Castlevania Nocturna and also
Hmm.
the initial Castlevania series as well. And they also did Blood of Zeus, Masters of the Universe there, Skull Island. They also did, so they did all those projects there as well. So 8 episode series you have here, so it'll be nice to get your input because you've played the games. I have not played the rebooted Tomb Raider games there. I know they also are coming out with a remaster of the original games. They're also doing that very recently.
Let me check. I want to say that might already have come out.
Okay. Yeah, because I know they also were talking about doing a collection of Tomb Raider collection there. For
Oh yes. So I guess there's three different remastered trilogies. So you've got the original three, like the PlayStation 1 games. Those got a remaster. Was that last year? I want to say that came out. And then they did a remaster of the reboot trilogy, like the PS3, PS or
Mhm.
PS3, PS4 games just like a year or two ago as well. And then they just also announced another round of remastered games that are like the PS2 era games. So that's like three whole sets of remastered trilogies that this brand is. I think sometimes people forget just how many of these there have been.
Mm. A whole lot there. With this kind of franchise, long running video game franchise there. So yeah, that's kind of the setup here. And like you said, it deals with kind of Laura, dealing with the death of her mentor Roth there. Who Roth in this is voiced by let me see if I can find the name. Who's Roth in this? Nolan North, there, who's famous voice actor Nolan
That
North.
that's
Nathan Drake,
hilarious, actually.
who's voiced characters like Nathan Drake, most famously there. So yeah, I mean, she's kind of trying to deal with the trauma of that. Also, there's another adventure there, of course, with Lara Croft there that she's going on a tomb raiding adventure. Can't be Lara Croft if she's not raiding some tombs, getting some treasure, fighting some bad guys there. Sage, what are your thoughts on this series here?
Well, it was an interesting watch because, starting the first episode, it was a little bit of a it was a little bit of a shock as just as far as going like, oh, I thought we'd totally like in this continuity kind of moved past this grieving process part of her character arc. The third game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it ends with her basically like putting the outfit on from the original games, and like it feels like, hey, we've completed the character arc. She's fully become the Tomb Raider here. And then starting the show, it kind of felt like, oh, hey, but we have one more story about her fully becoming the Tomb Raider before we're actually there. Um, so during the first episode, I was a little like, okay, it seems a little regressive. It seems like we're pulling back almost too far or ignoring some of what's already been established to make this work. Um, and I also think that in the first episode, I feel like the mystery of the artifact that we're dealing with here isn't maybe quite set up as much as it could have been. Luckily, though, I think a lot of that smooths over as the show starts to go on, as you get into the second episode. I started to pick up with it a lot more. The character dynamics started to click a little bit more. And I think the character arc that they're going for her, as much as I feel like we kind of already went through it, it started to feel like it fits in a way because I'll make this criticism of the reboot trilogy of games too, but I did feel like those games also kind of went, okay, but let's at the end of the game it's like, oh, she's made this big jump in her character, and then at the beginning of the next one it's like, all right, let's take her back a couple of steps. Um, so it's not fair for me to make that criticism of just the show and not make it about those games as well. But ultimately, I actually think this show did a better job than those games of actually showing that character arc. By the time you get to the end of it, I felt like it was a stronger showcase of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like because I wanna know a little bit from the reboot games, like, you're right, it is like a, kind of how does Lara Croft become the badass Lara Croft from the original games that we know? Because in those, she's pretty much already set in kinda her ways there as far as the personality and everything like that, been doing it for a minute. And then the reboot trilogy was like a way to kinda like an origin story there. And this one kinda feels a little bit like that too, in a sense, and then even the last episode, she gets the iconic 2 pistols there as well. She's
Which
has
happens at the end of the third game. So that's happened twice within this continuity.
Yeah, and I remember that happened in, like, the Alicia Vikander Tomb Raider, like, at the end of that movie, she also does that
Right.
in that with, her guy, and then and then Laura Croft, she has a team of people there, like, I think in the movie Alicia Vikander, it was, what's his name? Nick
Ooh,
Frost there from Shaun of the
oh,
Dead.
was it? Oh
Yeah.
wow, was that Frost? I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, and then in this animated version, she has, like, her tech guy, the guy that makes her equipment and costumes like that, so she has her tech guy that helps give her that. She also has another person there who's her, mentor there, a guy that's, Jonah there as well, who's a friend
Mhm.
as well there. You also have Camilla, who's
And
the
Jonah was part of the crew in the very first game of the 2013 reboot. That was part
okay.
of like the stranded crew. So he's actually been like a substantial supporting character throughout this whole kind of series or
Yeah.
continuity.
Zip is the dude who's, like I said, her tech expert there that's helping him. You always need a person in the chair. I guess he's that guy. You have Zoe Boyle, who plays Camilla Roth, who's the daughter of her mentor there. So she kind of comes in there, and you have the villain of this, Charles. I think his name is Davin something or Devore. There it's like
Devereaux,
Daviro there,
yeah,
who's
and Richard Armitage, right?
yeah, Richard Armitage, who people might know, he was in the TV series Hannibal for a minute there. He was
He
also
was
in The
also
Hobbit.
Trevor.
Oh, you say what?
He was Trevor in the Castlevania series as well.
Yes, he was also that as well there. So yeah, he's kind of well versed in voice acting as well there. So he's the main villain. How did you kind of like the villain in this? It was to me, it was a little campy, which I guess does that fit the style of Laura Croft there a little bit?
I think it does. It's interesting. So you mentioned how this was kind of trying to almost bridge the reboot series of games with the kind of classic series of games. And what's interesting about that is I feel like the tones of those two versions of Tomb Raider are very different. You know, Tomb Raider 2013 is a reboot. It is this like dramatic survival story. You spend a lot of time on her having to like take a human life for the first time, a moment that they kind of repeat again in this series, which again, it's like if that already happened in this continuity, why are we showing a scene of it? Something that's already been done within this exact same like there's some moments like that. But then the classic Tomb Raider is very much the I'm gonna run up a wall, backflip, and then shoot a dinosaur in the face in slow motion. So there's there's a little bit of a weird disconnect between these two versions of Tomb Raider, and I think this show does a decent job at trying to bridge that gap. Um, but it also it makes things like a what is like a very cheesy villain who I think fits into the old school Tomb Raider kind of perfectly. Like that's exactly what I would expect from like a evil mercenary in one of the old Tomb Raider games. But as far as like the way that they try and tell stories in the rebooted trilogy, it tries to be a lot more grounded in those. So it feels like very over the top for that and very campy for that. But then it kind of fits into the old versions pretty well. So I don't know. It's a weird gap to try to bridge. But I think the show does the best it can. But the tones between those two sets of games are just so different to begin with that you end up with some stuff like that where it's like some of these pieces don't totally feel like they're fitting together.
Mm, okay. Because when you look at, mentioned in the movies there, because that's kind of one of some of my more experience with the Tomb Raider stuff is the movies there, like with Alicia Vikander, which I saw, and that one was just kind of mediocre. Like like out of video game movies, it wasn't the most worst thing you ever seen, but it wasn't like it was kind of like okay. I mean, you
Yeah, it was
existed,
pretty forgettable.
you just kind of existed there, I guess. There
Only
was
fun
that.
part was Walton Goggins.
Yeah. And then with the Angelina Jolie movies, which I've seen a long time ago, would you say that with kind of the villain and kind of that fits kind of that tone a little bit, like with the Angelina Jolie type films there?
I would say that feels more like the tone of that. I mean, I haven't seen that at least that first one in so long. But I would say that it did have the feel of what those games felt like at the time. I don't know how good of a movie it is because it's been so long since I've seen it, but that is kind of the vibe. Like I remember as a kid, I definitely associated like Tomb Raider being like a very similar kind of character as like Trinity in the Matrix, like even
Mm,
just based on the games. So like it did have elements of that, correct? At the very least, stylistically.
mm, okay. Yeah. I mean, you saw she was doing backflips, she was shooting the guns, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
like
she had
the
her own
robot.
like danger room. She got her own like X-Men, she got her own danger room there.
Yeah.
Um, got that kinda going on. What'd you think about the supporting cast of this, in the show?
You know, it's interesting. I keep going back and forth on them. I think that they can be fun, and I think that they have moments, but I never felt like they never felt like super fleshed out characters. They felt like they were kind of stuck in the realm of archetypes still.
Mm.
And they had moments, and they that Jonah certainly had moments where I was like, oh, that's I appreciate how compassionate he is within the narrative here. And I definitely got a few chuckles out of was it Sid, the tech
Uh,
guy's name?
Zip, Zip.
Zip. Zip. I got a few chuckles out of him. I thought some of the jokes, not maybe all of them, but some of them I thought landed pretty decently well. Um, but I never felt like they were super engaging characters, or like they had or like they never it felt like they had like arcs themselves to me. Um, Lara feels like she has an arc, one that's repeated from previous entries, but an arc nonetheless. And I do feel like that's something that these Tomb Raider reboot games have suffered from since 2013, and to me is always kind of like Lara's good, and I'm engaged by what's going on with her, but there's always kind of a lackluster sense of character in its supporting cast, and that's been really consistent, I think, across all four of these stories.
Mm. Yeah, I think she's the most fleshed out person out of everybody, which makes sense. I mean, she's the lead character, but also what makes a great show is if you have a good supporting cast and they also feel like good characters themselves. And the side characters, they're fine. I mean, a lot of it is them worrying about Laura. I mean, they're kind of identity is so attached to her, and like she's
Yeah,
kind of cut herself off from everybody because of what happened with Roth, and you know it's a lot of, like, Jonah kinda trying to reach out to her and, "Are you okay?" in there. So there's a lot of that kinda going on. And of course, it's the streaming thing where, it's the 8 episode kinda thing. That's always the, dreaded 8 episode, season of a streaming service,
yeah.
which I think it works fine here. I don't think this needs to be very super long.
It probably could have been just a movie, or just an animated movie, honestly.
That might also work as well. I mean, you're not telling that really that complex of a story here, really. So it could have been maybe you fit into a movie, and each episode's about like 20 something to 30 something minutes long. So yeah, you could probably watch it in an evening in a day there. If you
I
just
did.
kind of set through there. Um, the action of the series, I would say, is really the animation. There is really one of the big selling points with this. What do you think about a lot of the action kind of going on?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. With one exception, I thought the kind of motorcycle chase in the first episode was a bit weak. But I thought once I got past that first episode into the rest of it, I thought that the rest of the action scenes were really good. And there's one in particular in kind of I mean there's I guess there's two or three in the last episode, but I thought those like back to back to back were like, okay, this feels like playing Tomb Raider in the early 2000s. And I thought that was really fun.
Oh, you're not talking about this, are you?
Yeah, I thought this was hilarious.
And where she's fighting a I don't even know what you call this thing, griffin, dinosaur,
I I
dragon
assume it's
shit.
a
Yeah.
Chinese mythology creature, but I
Yeah.
don't know what the name would be.
Yeah.
But there's another fight after this one, a bit later in the final episode, that was like, oh, this feels like ripped straight out of like the first Tomb Raider game.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, some of the anime, and you can say mention Powerhouse Animation who did Castlevania. If you ever seen Castlevania, great action scenes in Castlevania. Really takes your breath away there. I mean, none of it reaches that level, I think, for me, in this because
No,
Castle I mean, I guess you're dealing with people with powers and you get a lot of that kinda going, so they can really go wild, with a lot of that, like, a mage and a vampire and, all that stuff. You can really go wild with a lot of stuff happening there. So none of it reaches that level for me, there. But, I think still some strong animation that you have kinda going on, in this, as well there. So that was pretty nice. And I think one of the big things with the series there, so that's pretty strong. And they do set up a season 2, there at this. They kind of set that up. Would you wanna see a season 2?
I'd be open to watching it. I enjoyed this enough. Like I said, we're not telling a story here that's super complicated, right? This is a pretty
Right.
simple action movie story. Um, I would say maybe they could make it slightly shorter,
Five
but
episodes.
yeah, maybe five, or just make it, or just release it as a movie. Don't cut it into episodes. Just release it as an animated movie. I honestly think that would work better for the format.
Mm, okay. Yeah, because it's bad guy gets magic item. It's like most of how these adventure things go. He gets a magic item. He wants to do evil with the magic item, and then turn into a big creature, and then they have to fight the big creature there.
Yeah.
A lot of it is, with action adventure films like The Mummy or Indiana Jones or Uncharted or something. It's like the personality of the lead of the characters and the adventure, and can you make it exciting enough for them to do the thing that you care about? Like, I think the best thing about The Mummy isn't the real villain. I mean, even though the villain is good in The Mummy, with the way the actor plays him, it's, the cast and, the personalities there
Oh, for
with
sure.
that. Um, and I don't think, like I said, besides Laura, I don't think the personalities of everybody's really that strong there with kind of the adventure with that. I just it's kind of plain in that sense there. If they do a season two, I'd want to see them improve that. I think make some improvements there in the writing and make that stronger. Also, kind of make maybe more the animation a little bit better there and make it stronger. Go a little bit more wild there. You mentioned it in, like, the motorcycle. Let me see if I can pull up that scene, the motorcycle scene, if I can find that there, that was a little rough
Yeah,
for you.
I thought
I
that
thought
was a
that
little rough looking. I think the street and the buildings that she's racing through, just I think the 3D looked very distracting to me, where it's like I could tell the whole environment around it looked very 3D, and then the motorcycle and her looked very 2D. And I just thought that like it was lit in it was a nighttime scene, so it probably blended a little better because of that. But I just felt like there was just such an obvious kind of gap in the two animation styles that just I don't know, it didn't quite work for me.
mm, yeah, and, it's not I can't find the motorcycle scene of that one, but, I think there's some segments of it that look pretty good, I think, with that one. So yeah, you kinda had that going. Yeah. So classic, I mean, like you said, kinda classic, Lara Croft type of storytelling there with it, with kind of the action adventure, with the whole magical item, everything like that. Very short. You can watch this in a evening if you kinda wanted to there. For me, it's kinda average, I think, for me overall there. Nothing really super spectacular, there that stands out. I did like Haley Atwell as Lara Croft. Did like her voice work here and that. I did like the personality of, Lara Croft. I thought that worked really well, and of course, you would want your titular character to be the star of the show and to be kinda one of the best things about it, and I think she is here. Mention the animation and the action here that works well. I like how they incorporate different elements of the game there, like, there's even a puzzle scene there where they do the puzzle kinda stuff there, which is good. She has her trusty pickaxe, there that she has, which I remember that was a very key defining thing in the reboot video games was the pickaxe. They're using that to climb and everything like that. So yeah, for me, I give it a kind of a basic stream it for me. For this, what about you?
I'm right in the same spot. Basic stream it for me as well. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed my time with it. It was a good kind of popcorn. Again, I keep wanting to say movie because it feels more like a movie than a series, just tonally and how the how kind of basic the character arcs are. Um, And so I would still be open to another season though. I've en enjoyed this enough to be interested in that. Just like you though, I would be hopeful that they would maybe do some more with the supporting cast, just add more character to them. Um, if you have to introduce some new characters to do that, then so be it. Um, I think, being kind of the fourth entry in this continuity, having these three other games before it, and I felt like the supporting cast was a weak point in all three of those games. Doesn't leave me super hopeful that they actually will have a more interesting supporting cast in a season two, um, just because it feels like kind of a repeated mistake that keeps happening. But and then I guess the one other thing going into another season is just can we have a different character arc for Lara Croft in the if we do another one of these? Because like I said, the 2013 game, it was about her becoming the Tomb Raider and getting over the death of Roth. And then in the second game, it's like, oh well, she's got to kind of get over her grieving and become the Tomb Raider. And then in the third game, it's like, all right, she's finally going to get over her grieving and become the Tomb Raider. And I'm like, all right, okay, it feels like we finally did that. What's going to be next? And then this comes out and it's like, she's got to get over her grieving and become the Tomb Raider. I'm like, that's getting a bit repetitive now.
Yeah. Also, yeah, it shows a little bit of the in the trailer right here. So I can see what you mean about the buildings and everything like that. I can see, yeah, some of it following. So yeah, kind of obviously kind of 3D there with that. Yeah, like that right there. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, just a little bit. It wasn't like horrible by any means, but compared to the other action scenes that I did think were really fluid, that one just looked a little weird.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, so different season 2, different arc for Lara Croft there. She's got the 2 guns, okay, it's time that she's now settled in. She's okay with being a serial killer now. It's fine. Go out there and do those action adventure things and be the classic Lara Croft that we kind of know her to be there. And for some reason, even this, for some reason, got some controversy kind of going on with it, with kind of Lara Croft. So you got people like this who, yeah, are kind of circling things here, going like, she looks like a man here, and people pointing out this. Kind of, I don't know, like a forearm. I guess women don't have forearms. I guess I don't know what that's
No, I've never seen one. I've never seen a woman with
I yeah, so
or a chin. They
in
don't have
there.
those either.
Yeah. Even when you look at like her other so pretty much she is like similar to how she is in the reboot video game, which I say is pretty much there. So here's some different versions of kind of how she looks. So this is one version, obviously this is more from the early PlayStation era there, Laura Croft there.
She honestly doesn't even look that different from this though, either. Like it's even this isn't that different from the way she looks now.
Yeah, you see
Like
some different
especially if you pull up the very first game's costume,
like this one.
where she's well, yeah, and that's basically the original game's costume, just done in the reboot game style, pretty much. That's I mean the original game where she's got the tank top,
Yeah.
and I mean that's pretty much
Even
it.
even the same muscle definition there as in the animated show, I would say even that's
Yeah.
the similar there. Yeah, I, pretty much there. What is she playing? Oh, she playing with the Wii? Oh, they got her playing the Wii or
Oh
something?
gosh, she got Wii controller in her hand.
Yeah, damn, that's a throwback. Yeah, playing the Wii there. So yeah, I mean, it looks the same as some of the other versions we've been in, and very much the design of her is very much like the design of the reboot video game, very much trying to emulate that. So
Maybe
yeah,
they're just mad her boobs aren't triangles anymore.
yeah, they don't look like the Cybertruck anymore. Maybe the people are just mad at that. So yeah, that's just something. Of course, stupid people going stupid. I guess this is what it is there. With that.
You
So
know what these people are doing. They are unhappy. They don't like the way they look. And instead of doing any work on themselves or coming to term with any of their psychological issues, they're just digging a deeper and deeper hole in their soul, and they're just angry and they'll die alone.
gee. Yeah, I mean, you got this one response of this person who says that she looks like a uh JoJo Bizarre Adventure character there. Yeah, when you look at that there and you pulled up some JoJo Bizarre Adventure, it's like, yeah, very much they look like women. I mean, JoJo Bizarre Adventure characters
Yeah,
there. And then
that's definitely just a muscular woman.
yeah, and I mean, you watched a lot of JoJo Bizarre Adventure. I mean, yeah, I mean, you know about the designs of those characters there.
Yeah. Well, and
Uh,
it's not only is it funny because the Stone Ocean, the season that primarily features a largely female cast, has characters that they just look like muscular women. If you if you go and look at the male characters from Golden Wind, which is the second to most recent season, those are the most effeminate looking men like I've ever seen in anything. So it's maybe if you're going to complain that like oh she looks like a man, maybe don't use the most effeminate men of all time as the example.
yeah, the comparison in JoJo is really not the best
No,
example there.
it's
Um,
the worst example possible to try and make.
yeah, yeah. So, 2 streamings for uh the Legend of Lara Croft there, Tomb Raider. So 2 streamers there. All right.